Okay, here we go. It is episode number 49 of the Business Not As Usual podcast. Getting close to that magical number. And yet, here we remain, your ever-enduring hosts, Vince and Mike. I'm Vince. He's Mike. Mike, how are you today?
I'm fantastic, Vince.
Oh,
Coming up on that 50 is tremendous.
Yeah, we keep saying it, and we probably should have a conversation about the next episode, which will be number 50, because it should be something special. But and you know, it's almost an opportunity for us to look back and see, you know, what it is that makes this show what it is. Some people have described it as a great podcast. Some people have said the best podcast ever, and you know, various points in between,
and everything in between.
But you know, it's an opportunity for us to get back to, you know, what made this show what it is, to get back to the basics of the show, because I think we've always stayed true to the original vision of the show, which was just conversation, two dudes talking about business transformation. And I think there's a ton of value in, yes, we've evolved and we've changed and we've grown as podcasters and as interviewers and as, you know, just hosts, but we still stick to the basics, and I think we're getting really, really good at the basics.
Yeah, and I think we both listened to a podcast about it was called The Classic Internet, with people that we had both followed back in the day. Back in like the 2007, 2008 era of the internets.
The aughts, as you will.
That's it. And it was a podcast with somebody we're both familiar with, Brian Clark, who's the owner publisher of Copy Blogger, and then Darren Rouse, owner for Pro Blogger, and then a guy that we both have followed, Chris Brogan, who has been in a bunch of things. But what they were talking about was, after all these years and people doing a bunch of stuff, people are starting to get back to the basics of the classic internet. And I think that's what happens. You start one place and get some success, and then you're evolving and iterating, maybe move away from that, and then need to bring yourself back. And what they had talked about was they're all bloggers, and the blog was their hub. That was their home. And then everything else was like the spoke to the hub. But people kind of got away from that, and they started using other things that they actually didn't own. So, you know, if you're on Instagram, that's not your content. It's your content, but if Instagram goes down, you lose all those followers. You lose all those people. There's no way for you to contact them because they're not yours, and all that content's gone. So if you have 3,000 pictures on there and something happens, all that content, all that stuff that you've done over the last 2 or 3 years is gone. And so what they were talking about is having that home base of your website, blog, of which you own, and an email list of which you own. And so if anything ever happens, it doesn't matter, because that list of your contacts, of the people that follow you, are yours. And so I thought that was kind of a good thing to talk about today, because as you try and evolve, sometimes you got to pull back and think of and then just think about the basics.
Yeah, and I think, you know, between the two of us, and I know of the two of us, I'm the one that probably complains the most about we need to get more content out there. We need to be better about, and it's like, and I know you're good about bringing, but what are we not doing that we need to do more of? We share stuff. Everything goes out to our social channels, and I think between the two of us with this show, we probably do a pretty good job of putting it on, you know, I think you're putting it on Medium and on your blog. I probably should be better about taking the show notes, embedding this into my own blog. It's just it
Mhm.
is that, I use my website, vincentmirabelli.com, as my hub. That is my base. And
Mhm.
from there, everything else happens. And yet I do a really crappy job of actually putting stuff, like every week we do this episode, and I have my analyst after work, plus all the other stuff. And
Mhm.
I'm not doing a good job of it because it's hard. And I think, that's where we can use that as a springboard into the connection to business transformational work, because you have to remember to do these things and remember that where that hub is. And the
Mhm.
hub typically is a need, and it's a need to change. And so everything stems from that initial need to change.
Yeah, and I think if you look at Vince, you have a ton of content, and so if we go back to the classic internet was all about your blog, which you put a lot of
Yeah.
content on, and then people can find you. But it
Yeah.
was mostly writing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
so and then everybody thought, well, I don't want to write. It takes a long time to write. Then we started podcasting, and then there's Instagram, and then you put those informational Instagram posts, and then but if you think about it, your blog is just a place to put all your content. So it's a place to
Yes.
consolidate it. So you may have this show that goes out through different avenues, and for the people out there, you may write a blog or you may do a bunch of things, but are you consolidating that in one place that becomes your property? Like it's yours,
Right.
it's embed you. And so you can use all these other free things to push it out, but you should have that as your home base. And I think putting your podcast on your blog, that's completely acceptable. You don't have to always write something.
Mm-hmm.
You can write like a little thing. And so what need are you trying to fulfill? If you have a blog, you're trying to get content for people to find you because
Right.
you have something to say. You're trying to get business. If you're a small business, that's a way to get business. If you're a deck builder and you show videos on how to do certain things, then you start to become known as a thought leader in that space. So
Mm-hmm.
that is what I'm saying about getting back to basics. Let's not forget what made people successful throughout the era of the classic internet, because
Mm-hmm.
those things still work. They just evolve a bit, but you shouldn't get completely away from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Agreed. And I think we're getting back there. We're because I'm to sit down and write, and we've talked about this, I think, offline. To sit down and write, nope, not gonna happen.
Interest.
No interest. Just in the lead up to this, we were talking about how
Yes.
I came down an hour
And what did you do instead of write?
Well, I didn't come down to write. Well, I did come down to write. I came down because there's a deadline for a major conference in the fall, and today is the deadline to submit. So I came down an hour before we went live to work on it.
Yep.
And I did anything else.
Everything but the submission.
I mean, in fairness, I did clear a couple of my flag for follow-up notes. I sent out some invoices. So I mean, it's not like I sat here and like twiddled my thumbs, but I didn't come down to do the thing that I came to do because I had to write it. If I was able to create, just, hey, talk for 30 seconds, tell us what your idea is, and then submit that, I could do that. Would have been done. So
you know what's hilarious?
What's that?
Why they don't do that? Because it's a speaking gig, but they want you to write out. And I'm not going after this particular. Every conference does the same thing. Here, fill this out. So they want you to write stuff, but you're actually presenting. So wouldn't it be better to actually send me a video for 30 seconds to see how you present, and then they can get that information that way instead of having people sit down and write it.
Right. Which is what TED does.
It's hilarious.
TED, the TED
well,
talk,
it makes sense, right?
That's what it is. It's talk for a minute. Tell us your idea in a minute. right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but anyways, I came down and I didn't do what I needed to do, and it's just it dragged on, and then it was
Oh,
3:15,
look at
and I was like, I could start it now, and I actually did, and then I thought, no, I'm not going to finish it before we
before
podcast,
we
so
start. Yeah.
before we start, so I was like, I'll restart afterwards.
Yes.
So this is gonna be like it's due at midnight. I'm gonna be in my office at 11 o'clock
Uh,
tonight working on it. Anyways, that's neither here nor there.
but that is
Yeah,
getting back to basics, right?
yeah, it
Clearing
is.
away all the other things that get in the way, and if we transition to like a business transformation
Mm-hmm.
after like a year or however long, I bet you if you were to go back and then look at all the things you're doing now against your business case, I bet you 9 times out of 10, you're not doing any part of that business case, or you're so far away from the basics of that business case. You're doing everything but. So just like Vince, you're doing all the things but writing the submission,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Because you
And that's what we're
deviate a
talking
little
about.
bit, right? You
A little
deviate a
bit, a
little
little
bit.
bit.
You deviate a little bit. You deviate,
But,
and it's like once your heading is off, you're done.
well, consistency is both a curse and a strength. So
Right.
we do this podcast every week, once a week, half hour, consistent, and we're getting a good viewership.
Mm-hmm.
But if every week you change slowly a little bit of what you're supposed to do, eventually you're like, how do we get so far off course? There's nothing that was big bang about it.
Mm-hmm.
You just consistently changed your path away from your original business case. So now your transformation is nowhere near what you had envisioned it.
Right. And I think the reasons for that is all the stuff we've talked about in previous episodes. It's the fact that you have people that are making decisions, but then you make them secure the buy-in of the governance, who
Right.
then homogenizes the idea. You have people that maybe aren't bought into the vision, and so they take it askew. There are people that just don't know or are afraid of the change, and so they pull you just slightly,
Just a bit, just enough.
back to the current state, to where by the end you've gotten through your requirements process, and you look at it and it's like, we're not making any changes. Yeah, we're bringing in a new platform or whatever, but we're not actually changing anything, and that's a massive waste of time and money.
And like these sorry, I thought we've come to this, and I'm like, man, I didn't know we were going to get here, but it's like exciting.
Okay.
Because at what you just said, you get to the end and go, how did this happen?
Yeah.
And there's nothing, and there's no like thing you can go, that was it. It was like this consistent moving away from the path, and all of a sudden you don't deliver what you wanted to after 3 or 4 years or whatever. And it's super interesting what you said. It's like, and the story to tell of like, how did this happen is nuanced, right? So like you said, have a great team, they bring it through governance, a little bit changes, a little bit changes, a little bit changes. Some people don't want to change, a little bit changes, a little bit changes. You have leaders that don't really buy in, a little bit, and then all of a sudden it's like a completely different project, but it snuck up on you because you couldn't get back to the basics of that original vision of business case.
Right. Yeah, and it sneaks up on you when you just look at the beginning and the end.
Yes.
Right? It's like watching a flower grow. Like, the flower is growing all the time, but the only way you see it is when you speed it up.
Right.
So, your project is changing, your transformation is changing if you allow it to. And I mean, it can change for the positive too. But the only way that you see it is when you look at a snapshot of the beginning and a snapshot of the end, and then you like, how did this happen? And the answer is gradually, like so imperceptibly that you didn't even notice.
Yes, I think, and that's the danger. It's so
Right.
unnoticeable that no one's paying attention, and the next thing you know, bam, you're
Right.
and then sometimes you deliver something, go, that's not what we wanted to deliver. How did this
Mhm.
happen?
Mhm.
And there's no way to trace it back because it was a slow grind to away from the thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's how you end up moving from being a florist to the number one auto producer in the South American continent. I don't know, but
Right.
it's those small incremental changes, and that's why when we talk about transformational work, that you do it iteratively, so that you do have those points along the way where you can take stock.
Of
And I think
reflection, yes.
yeah, and that's an important part of the process. Is again, when we look at agile as a discipline, you have those constant feedback loops where you are iterating through your product or your process or your service, and you have an opportunity to adjust, so that if you're not doing, if what you're delivering isn't aligning to the original vision of the transformational program, that you can adjust and you can tweak back. So yeah, you went off course a little bit, but it's not fatal until a year from now, where you've gone 1% off every day. Instead of ending up in New York City, you end up in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, like or in Miami.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah,
mean, and just a micro to that is, I mean,
Mhm.
we're coming up on 50. So we
Mhm.
had a 25th episode retrospective
Mhm.
where we got to think about things. And I know we're always like, yeah, we just go on the fly, but we do think about things and talk them over.
Mhm.
And then as we had our year end
Mhm.
retrospective, like the things we liked about the podcast, like the top shows, that again reorients ourselves. And now we're going to do it again at 50. And so
Right.
just in 50, we've looked at ourselves 3 times. So what
As episodes, like,
as episodes, right? So we're
yeah.
already looking at ourselves 3 times at the episode level of, are we staying on what we wanted, original intent of this podcast? Are we straying from that? And if we are we doing it on purpose? Because it's okay to stray as long
Mhm.
as you're doing it on purpose. If you're
Mhm.
doing it like if it just sneaks up on you,
Mhm.
then we'll have a different show, but you'll have a different transformation. It's perfectly exactly the same analogy.
Yeah. Imagine Business Not As Usual podcast, your number one podcast for all things cat related.
Right. Or
Like,
all things AI,
how did
because
that
we
happen?
got yes. Why are we talking about that?
Why
I
are we
don't
talking about
know.
cats? I don't know.
I
It
don't
just
know.
sort of
Well,
gradually happened.
we are business not as usual, so we can talk about everything else but business.
And I mean, that was the beauty of the name, right? Like that we had that opportunity
We
to talk about whatever we wanted within
at the
the
micro,
sphere, at the micro, right?
yes, but at
Within
the
the sphere.
macro, we do want to stay centered around transformation, not doing it the same way. But yes, at the micro, when people go, can you actually have that on your podcast? Yeah, we're
Mhm.
not as usual.
Yeah.
We do what we want.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like The
So,
Rock's cheat meal. Does anybody know about
oh,
Dwayne The Rock Johnson's infamous Sunday cheat meals?
enlighten us, sir.
Well, he's getting ready for Black Adam. Huge. I think it's is it no, not Marvel. It's the other one, DC Comics.
Yeah.
And so he's been training, and so 6 days a week he has a very strict diet and workout regimen, and then Sunday is gluttonous Sundays, and he shows like the ridiculous, like 87 pancakes and donuts and
Mm-hmm.
pasta and all the other crap that he had, including his Terramana
Mm-hmm.
uh, tequila,
Yes.
just to do something different, but then get back to the basics of what he does the rest of the week. So
Right.
it's kind of like that when we have a deviation of our episodes.
Right. And I think that's important, right? You gotta shock.
You gotta shock
You gotta
the
spice
system
it up.
once
You
in a
gotta
while.
shock the system.
That's right.
And so, that's what that cheat meal does. Is it reminds your body of what carbs are, and then the rest of
and
the
the
week,
goodness of like
and the
maple
goodness
syrup,
and the goodness of maybe those banana. Is it the no
coconut.
peanut
Ba-
butter?
well,
Anyways,
they're like banana coconut, and then he puts peanut butter on top of
that's
the
it. That's
pancake,
it.
and then
That's it.
he drowns it in a bucket of maple syrup.
Right. If you haven't seen what we're talking about, check out The Rock on Instagram.
Yeah,
It is truly legendary.
it is something to behold.
It is something. But yeah. But that's that. To your point, that's the plan, right? He doesn't deviate
Right.
Monday to Saturday. He's on target. And then that's his one deviation, knowing that he's not straying so far that, Black Adam is going to end up being not what he's supposed to be. Just regular Adam.
Tubby Adam.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know. I'm not all that familiar with the Black Adam character, so I don't know.
He's the anti-hero. So
is he the anti? So he's like
Yes,
he's like Batman, but
he's
not
like the
Batman.
bad. Yes. So
okay.
I'm really excited. But
yeah,
I mean, even in your transformation, you could have a deviation to shock the system or to go in, but you always have to have those check-in points to make sure you're still aligning to the original vision, business case.
Right. So that at least if you're doing it for a reason. And it's not,
you're doing it on purpose.
On purpose, yeah, intentionally.
Because most people, it's not on purpose, and then haphazardly you get somewhere, and it's usually not where you want it to be.
Yeah, and this is where you'll start. At least I've noticed with some of the folks that I've worked with in the past, the ones that see it coming or have done it before, they want to be off. They want to be the first ones off the ship. Because they see it coming and they're like, yeah, I don't want to be associated with this. I don't want to work on this. I gotta figure out how to disassociate. I think that's the word you used. Disassociate myself from this work, because it started out as one thing, but it's morphed along the way into something that's not going to be overly positive.
Well, I mean, if those people have experience and they're telling you it's coming because they see it, they're like the canary in the, like, I've seen this before, this is what's happening, and they're not listened to, then then what happens is what you say happens. Okay, you're not gonna listen to me. I'm telling you it's coming. The tidal wave's coming. You're not listening. All right, I want off because I know what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
I know what's gonna happen with this project. I know where we're going. We're gonna be part of that 84% that takes the L that we talk about, and we're going to be talking about again. But that's what's going to happen. And if you don't, your best people who have experience in transformation are going to be heading for the hills because they know that you've deviated so far from the original intent of the business change that they don't want to be part of what's coming, of the failure.
So how do we then get back to basics? Let's get back to the basics of this episode. How do we get back to the basics? What are some of the things that you've either seen be effective or that you would suggest in getting back to that, getting back to the basics of the work?
Right. So if we started off with going back to the classic internet, we know the things that make you successful as a company is if you're an influencer, if you just write, like, your main property is either your website and your blog, and you put all your stuff on there and you have all your contacts, and you don't lend that out to the other to social media platforms. If you know that and you've deviated from that, then you got to get back to doing those things, because those are the things that those are the basics. So now let's go to the transformation. And like we said about this podcast, if you're not constantly looking back at intervals, which people don't do, because no one has a retrospective. They have a retrospective at the end of the program altogether. If you're not looking at it and going, are we still aligned to what we were supposed to be doing? And then going, oh, we're not. Okay, what are those things that are deviating from it? Those need to be cut, and it's not a discussion. You need to get back to what you originally said, because first thought, best thought. I'm telling you, your original intent was probably right, and you need to start doing those initiatives, those iterations that are back to that, as opposed to what you're doing. So someone needs to corral it. You always need a whatever that time frame is, but you need to always link back and reevaluate what you're doing in relation to where you started and what you wanted to accomplish.
Yeah, and you said it perfectly. I you need to pare away. It's like a bonsai tree. Like, you pare away the dead stuff, the stuff that is holding other. Obviously I've never grown a bonsai tree, but you need, in order for, yeah, exactly, in order for the tree to grow, you have to pare some away. And so if you want to have that, that success and deliver the change that you're trying to, that was the impetus for the start of your transformational work, you've got to, because I think it's natural, you're going to have things that get added on. Hey, while you're working on that system, can you also upgrade this thing for me? Oh, hey, while you got that scoped over there, can you also expand your scope to include it? And it's like, but you have to make those difficult decisions to prune away things that are holding you back, because as that grows and gluts, it's actually, I know you're probably doing it because you're trying to play nice and you're trying to, have a bigger impact.
Or sometimes it does make sense. Like,
sure,
we never thought this podcast would be a interview podcast. We'll have people on, we'll just interview them, but we do it. So it's good. Those are some things that are good that you could add, but then we go back to what the original intent of the podcast was. And that's what Vince is talking about. So there may be some additions that may be helpful, but if you keep doing the additions, you're not going to end up doing your actual transformation.
Right. Yeah. And that's it. I mean, focus on the basics. And if you can do other things, cool. But don't let those other things become the thing.
And it should be at the expense of the basics.
Correct.
It shouldn't be at the expense of your original intent. If you're crushing, as it were, the intent and all the initiatives, and you can add more, great. But for the most part, no one ever does that. But if you're crushing it and you're such a well-oiled transformational machine, then yes, you should for sure try and take on more things to push the envelope. But if you're not, and the transformation looks like it's teetering, you have to go back. You have to look at it like Vince said, the bonsai tree, and you need to ruthlessly cut away the things that are taking you away from the basics of what the original vision was.
Yeah, because the basics is in many cases the basics is all you need. The other stuff is nice, but it's getting back to,
it's not the core of your business.
What it is that is that core piece of what you do and why you do it. And if you stay aligned to that, you're going to be that much better off. Yeah. All right. So we talked about a lot of stuff. It was
multifaceted this half hour, Vince.
Bonsai trees, the rock,
our podcast, blogging.
It was, and I think this has been a reminder to me to be much better about actually hosting that. Like, yes, we're hosting this on YouTube, but to your earlier point, if YouTube goes away, these videos are all gone.
Yes.
Right. Like this podcast is gone. Now, I don't think YouTube's going anywhere. But Stranger Things, right? So I have to be much better about actually extracting the video. And I'm not talking like, here's a link to YouTube. Actually taking the video and putting it on my website, and maybe you can do the same, so
Right.
that we have a permanent record. Because like 50 episodes of this, 40 episodes of my other show, it's a lot, and
It would be a crying shame, Vince, if
for that to
gets
go.
lost.
Yeah.
And for all you people, all you listeners, if you have a blog, but you're not putting anything on there, and you're sharing content and everything else but your own property, you need to. It's okay to have Instagram and YouTube, but you need your own home base that people can find you and your content. And you need to own your own contacts somehow. All those contacts you have on that are part of all the other social medias, you need to have those. They're yours. They're not Instagram's. They're just, Instagram is benefiting from the content and from the connections that you're making. You need to benefit from them.
Now I feel like you're talking to me personally, because
I'm talking.
No, but it feels like it, because it's been a while. Right. I put a lot of focus into building out my list. I got several hundred people on there from my other channels, and have not done a lot with it because I've been working on so many other things. Right. I started this year with, I'm gonna leave some space for cool things to happen, and that space has completely evaporated, and now I'm operating at 100. Yeah,
it's another thing they talked about on that podcast, is about getting back to the basics of an email newsletter, an email list, because that's actually where you get the most interaction.
I know.
Vince thinks I'm just talking to him. I'm talking to everyone.
No.
And I hope everyone
know that you're talking to everybody
who has a blog or has that list, start using it again, because it is the thing that's making a comeback. Because it is a successful way of doing it. And again, it's back to basics.
And the reality is, we're doing a lot of stuff. We've got a lot to actually talk about. So, if I sent that newsletter out once a week, there would be one episode of this, one episode of my other show, and, a code to get a discount on my courses. Like, I've got so much stuff.
Do you see, Vince? Do you see? Do you see?
I do, and I think I need an assistant. So if anybody out there would like to be my assistant, hit me up. You can
apprentice, as it were.
Well, I mean, it's not a terrible job. I'm nice. But you can hit me up, visit my website and use the contact form at vincentmirabelli.com, or
#apprentice.
If you have no interest in helping me out, but you want to, you like what the Mike is cooking, you can get him at michaelmartino.ca. But for us, this has been the Business Not As Usual podcast. We will see you in episode 50.
See ya.